You're listening to Masters Cast.
Masters Cast, the first He-Man and She-Ra podcast, episode number 25 for Sunday, January 28th, 2007. Hello and welcome to Masters Cast, the premier He-Man and She-Ra podcast of power. I am John Callis, also known as The Shadow.
I'm Katie Carty, also known as Rainbow Bright.
And I'm Martin Penny, also known as Wacky Martin.
Wacky Martin is back, folks!
Yay!
Thank you.
He's back. Our good friend Josh D. Lioncourt is on vacation, so watch out for Josh. He's in Pennsylvania, but not where I live, and he's probably experiencing the wonders of snow. The wonders of snow, folks. Okay, actually, we want to hit on a few things. First, we actually have a special interview. Ooh. First, we want to hit on a few things. Katie, I believe you said we got some messages about the lost episode that I never posted, right?
That is correct, Shadow. Where is it?
It's still lost. I'm trying to find it. It's much like the TV show Lost, which I don't watch, but I assume they're lost somewhere. And no one has found them. Well, I'm still looking for the lost episode, and guess what? While looking for that lost episode, I came across another lost episode that we might have recorded last week, but that lost episode has been put on the back burner for now because of this special episode that we're doing today. So that's all good. I just think we need to run through a few news items first, which are probably also in one of the lost episodes, but it was just announced that the New Adventures of He-Man Volume 2, which will complete the series, the DVD will hit stores on March 27th. And also, She-Ra, Princess of Power, Season 1, Volume 2 DVD will make its way to stores when? That would be April 3rd. Of course, both sets will be filled with art cards, bonus features, documentaries, awesome disc, box art, everything. I may even pop out of one of the DVDs and be like, yay, you bought He-Man and She-Ra. But in any case, today we have an actual special edition of Masters Cast. I'm calling it a special edition even though it is episode 25 because so many episodes before it have been titled episode 25. And this is the episode that won. So remember, 2 lost episodes coming soon, but for your listening pleasure today, we have an exclusive, and that's right, exclusive. No one else has this, folks. No one else has this in audio, I should say. This is an exclusive interview we have with Jack Olesker, who not only wrote the series Bible of the New Adventures of He-Man, but he wrote countless of the episodes. The New Adventures had 65 episodes. He wrote so many of them, we can't even sit and count them because they are all so awesome. And he has been so nice to sit down with us and talk about the New Adventures of He-Man. So we are going to give him a call right now.
Yes, we are. Hi, this is Katie Rainbow Bright.
How are you? So good to hear your voice.
Yours too. I'm here with John the Shadow.
Hello.
And
Hi, John. How you doing?
Good.
Martin is here as well. Say hi, Martin.
Hello.
Hi, how are you doing? Gee, it's so good to finally hear everybody's voices.
You too. This is awesome.
I should say.
Well, do you want to start it recording, Shadow? We've got several wonderful questions for you.
Yes, thanks so much for agreeing to this.
My pleasure. Believe me, it's been a real privilege for me to be on heman.org, and I think it's something that very, very few writers get the pleasure of enjoying, to get that direct feedback from people who are fans and or critics of the work they've done, albeit the work was 17 years ago. It's nonetheless very exciting for me, and it's been very rewarding, and I've enjoyed it tremendously. So I'm very happy to be here.
All right, so we are here with Jack Olesker, and he did so much for the New Adventures of He-Man, but he also worked on original development for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. He worked on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Care Bears, Super Mario Brothers, basically like every show out there. I mean, it's just a long list of awesome shows. But we are here to talk about He-Man, and he's been gracious enough to join us for this Masters Cast session. So we're very happy. Thanks again, Jack, for agreeing.
Thanks, my pleasure. And you're absolutely right. I've been very blessed to have a long career in children's entertainment, and also for adults. I write horror novels and murder mysteries. My mother once asked me how such a nice boy that could write for the Care Bears could write such frightening things for adults. And I told her, well, if you worked for the Care Bears for about 6 or 8 years, you'd want to get out there and do some mayhem too. It's so sweet.
Well, I guess we should start off for fans that don't know. How exactly did you originally get involved with the New Adventures of He-Man?
Well, I started out working with a gentleman named Jean. Actually, before that, I started out in Chicago writing my first novel while I was working in my parents' clothing stores. And Sherry Lansing, who at the time was with MGM but went on to become CEO at Paramount Motion Pictures, bought the film rights for my first novel along with Bill Castle, who produced Rosemary's Baby. And I moved out to L.A. and ended up working with Mel Blanc, who anybody that knows about animation knows that Mel was the voice of hundreds of characters. Mm-hmm. His son Noel carries on his work. And worked with that company for a couple of years. And then I met a gentleman named Jean Chalopin, who had just moved over to the United States and was interested in starting a children's entertainment company. And we happened to live in the same condo building, and John had heard about my books and asked me if I'd be interested in working in children's television. I started working with John in a company, a very small company that was over a beauty shop in Studio City, and John called the company Deke, and I was his first staff writer, and of course he and I and Andy Hayward and a number of other people there went on to build up the company to become the largest independent producer of children's entertainment in the world. And one of the fellas that I got to be very close with was Mark Taylor, who was the company's chief financial officer. And when John eventually sold the company in a leveraged buyout to Andy and Bear Stearns, Mark left the company, and a couple of years later, John brought him in to form a company called Jetlag Productions. And John called me in for a number of early development projects. And one day I'm sitting at home, and I get a call from Mark Taylor, and he says, Jack, we've got something interesting from Mattel. We want to pull you in on it because we know you write fast and you write well. So he said, New Adventures of He-Man. And, of course, I had been a He-Man fan for a long time. And he said, what we need you to do is start out writing the series Bible and then a 5-part episode. And series Bible is basically a 50 to 70-page document that creates the entire world that the characters live in and all of the characters and the location and the format of the episodes and then story springboards. And then he wanted me to do the 5-part episode. So I said, well, that's fine. I'm thrilled to take on that task. He said, the only trouble is that we need the series Bible in 2 weeks and we need the 5 episodes in a month.
Oh, my God.
So I really went 24/7, which ironically ended up being the name of my production company, 24/7 Productions. But I pounded that out and was very fortunate to work with wonderful executives over at Mattel, Karen Lee Brown and Deborah Liani, tremendous executives that gave a lot of creative latitude, as did Mark. And Mark and I, of course, had worked together for 10 years, so we had a good working relationship. I don't know if everybody knows it, but Mark went on to head up Nickelodeon Studios in Burbank, which he's still doing quite successfully today. So I pounded out the episode, waited with bated breath for about 10 days, an eternity, and then Mattel called back and said, gosh, we just love it, and we're going to give you guys a pickup for 65 episodes. And
wow.
So that was very exciting stuff, and I started writing, and I was writing 37 of the episodes myself, and then I farmed out some of the work and also worked with Jack Mendelson, who was, of course, a iconic figure in children's television. And I wrote the 37 episodes in a period of about 18 weeks.
Oh,
so
wow.
I was writing about 3 episodes a week, and it's kind of like the Air Force boot camp that I went through in my 20s. I'm glad I went through it, but I wouldn't want to go through it again. It was grueling. And really one of the high points, and I just posted this on the on the wonderful site last night. And by the way, as a little aside, this writer cannot possibly express how grateful I am to everybody that is involved with heman.org and with BCI for the re-release of the DVDs. The website is just absolutely spectacular, but you guys all know that. Then one of the high points, as I said in a post that I made yesterday, once we had the 5 episodes, we strung those 5 episodes together, and we released that as a feature film to be premiered at MGM's Theater in Culver City, California. Mike Block posted that they did something very similar on ITV over in England. And I go to this premiere in Culver City, and I had no idea what I was walking into. And I walk into this theater, and there's 1,500 screaming kids, aged 5 years old up until 9. And it was just amazing, and we ran the show, and they were just going crazy. And we had a live-action He-Man and Skeletor that kind of duked it out with swords up on the stage. So that was a high point.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's how it got launched.
Now, you mentioned that you did create the series Bible. When you were crafting something like that, did you let the old Filmation He-Man and She-Ra cartoons influence you at all, or did you really want to take it in like a completely different direction? How did you go about, forming the series Bible?
It's a very interesting question, and I have balanced as I've spent the last 6, 7, 8 months on heman.org. I've tried to explain that toy companies are businesses, and we all love the He-Man franchises. Hopefully, some of the classic fans like NA, and I know that a lot of them have warmed up to it, which I'm very thrilled to see. Mm-hmm. But we all love it for what it is. For a toy company like a Mattel or a Hasbro or a Lego, they are in business primarily to sell toys.
Exactly. Yeah.
So their wants and needs are different from what ours are as fans. Mattel, the powers that be at Mattel, at some point came to the conclusion that the He-Man had been a spectacularly successful project for them, toy-wise. But at some point they look at their graphs and they look at their charts and they begin to see diminishing sales. And, how many He-Man action figures can you buy of He-Man? How many Man-at-Arms action figures, Battle Cat, how many Orcos can you actually buy? There becomes eventually a saturation point. Mm-hmm. So what they decided was, let's spin it in a different direction. Let's take him away from all of these classic characters and introduce a new line of action figures and play sets to generate excitement in the series. And that's exactly what they did, so they could sell more toys, of course. Mm-hmm. So they called me in and presented me with the line. They already had the idea that they wanted to take it to someplace in the distant future, far away from Eternia. And by the way, Eternia is not Primus. I hope that's a definitive answer.
Yes.
All right.
I know I've seen that brought up a lot. But they wanted to bring it far away from Eternia. Now, my feeling in my heart of hearts was, you're going to disenfranchise a lot of loyal He-Man fans because we're going to leave these great characters behind. And what I had hoped to do, as I posted at length in the New Adventures of He-Man 1990 annual thread from post 27 on, I had hoped that in season 2 we would return to Eternia with Skeletor and He-Man and some of the mutants with his job done in Primus, and bring them back and reunite with a lot of our characters back on Eternia, and amazing things would have happened in He-Man's absence, with Man-at-Arms taking over and She-Ra and the Sorceress and Teela forming an alliance to try to wrest control back of Eternia. So I saw a lot of exciting things going on in season 2. Unfortunately, I believe that Mattel made a tactical error in not explaining to all of these loyal fans that, hey, we're going to pull them away, but we're going to come back. And that's, I think, where a lot of the problem came to exist. And one other point that I'll make, and then turn it back to you guys, a number of fans have said, gosh, I just don't see He-Man leaving everybody on Eternia, leaving his family, leaving his friends. Well, you know what? I do. And I do because of the nature of He-Man himself. I mean, how can we possibly imagine this iconic hero hearing somebody come to him and say there is an entire civilization in the future that depends on your coming here to rescue us? Otherwise, we're going to fall to evil forces, in him saying, sorry, I've got friends and family here. You know, it is something that down through history, soldiers of every nation have made this ultimate sacrifice to leave their family and leave their friends to defend the causes of liberty. So I see that fitting very much with the He-Man persona.
Well, I would agree definitely with that.
Very good point.
Katie, I think you had another question kind of dealing with Series Bible.
I did. Since you came up with the entire idea for the series, the world they were going to be on, and the characters, I was wondering kind of how you came up with the new characters like Master Sevrian, Drissy, and also how you came up with their names. I was wondering if you had any inspiration for those characters in your own life.
Yes, excellent question. First of all, and I need to make this point, I believe, and I confess I haven't looked at it yet, but I believe that the series Bible that is in the DVDs is not the original series Bible that I wrote. I believe, because I've heard a number of things that are in it that I know are not in my series Bible, which is not a subjective value judgment on my point one way or another. What I believe that is an early development document from Mattel that was presented to me, which is fine, you know, no fault, no claim, but I just want to make that point. The series Bible, when I'm developing it, when it's with a toy company like Mattel or the Care Bears or Rainbow Bright or whatever it is, somebody comes to me with an existing toy in this case, and they say, here's the toy line. And I go into Mattel, and they have a room where they make a presentation of that entire toy line. And what's gone on for about 6 months to a year before I'm even called in is the development and the focus groups that Mattel conducts to arrive at that point. They may have had 2 or 3 times as many characters, but a lot of them get weeded out. I always enjoyed going into Mattel's headquarters, and they would have a large room there, maybe 20 by 20 with a mirror, and they'd bring in 5th and 6th graders, and they'd let them play with these toys. I'm getting another call coming in, but we'll let that go. And they bring in these 5th and 6th graders and let them play with the toys they developed for 6 months. And sometimes these kids would take the toys out of the box and start playing with the toys. And other times they'd take the toy out of the box and they'd throw the toy away and start playing with the box. You'd see these Mattel executives who had spent like 6 months developing this toy. They'd just like shrivel like the Wicked Witch of the West with the water thrown on them. So it was a long process to get to the point that they make the actual formal presentation to the writer of the toy line. So by the time I came in, they had a pretty good idea of what they wanted, and they showed me the prototypes. And interestingly, by the way, there were 2 waves of release. There were the initial characters, although they showed me the entire toy line. And those initial characters were going to be released, Flog and Slushhead, of course, and the mutants. And then there was a second release, a second wave that would come about halfway into the season. So that's the reason why some of those characters were not introduced until later. With Mattel and with Jetlag, because we had a long relationship, and I had worked with both Deborah and Karen at Mattel and many other projects, they gave me a tremendous amount of latitude. So they certainly said to our core characters, we want to use them. We want them to to be the main characters that are going to be in there. But if you want to develop other characters on your own, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. So that was something that was exciting to me. And I did develop a number of other characters. Master Cebrian was one of the characters that I developed, and he was really patterned after. You asked about how my personal life related to it. He was patterned after the headmaster of my school when I was in high school, who was an amazing Renaissance man named Jerem Clapper. He was a former Green Beret, and he was also the head of the Great Books Foundation in Chicago. So he was really my mold for Master Cebrian. And then Drissy, Drissy was the first time that anybody's ever known this. I think except Mark Taylor, but Drissy was patterned after one of my ex-wives. So that was patterned after one of my ex-wives, and that was a term of endearment that I used to call her. I used to call her Drissy. Unfortunately, that term of endearment kind of faded at the end of my life.
I can imagine.
So those things do happen, and you do pull in influences in your life, and of course you try to put them into the show.
That's great. Thank you.
I think, you did mention you had a lot of ideas if there was going to be a season 2 of The New Adventures of He-Man. I think Martin has a question about that.
Go ahead, Martin. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I'm not sure what to ask now.
Did you already answer it?
Yeah, can I ask a different question?
Of course, Martin.
I know you kind of shook up Skeletor's character in the series.
Right.
Made him funnier and gave him like more one-liners and more of a kind of personality. And what were your reasons behind that?
Again, excellent question. And, I find this, by the way, throughout all my experience on heman.org. He-Man fans are they're so incisive and so into the franchise, and they ask great questions. And, I really welcome constructive criticism as well as the fans. I certainly don't expect everybody to love NA, but even the criticisms are really well thought out, and I appreciate that. With Skeletor, number one, of course, we wanted to distance him in time and place from Eternia. But my feeling was that everybody knew Skelly so well. I wanted to have a change with him, and I wanted to have a change with He-Man as well. And somebody actually made an interesting observation the other day. They said that He-Man didn't seem quite as demonstrative when he came to Primus as he did on Eternia, and that point is absolutely correct. When he was on Eternia, he was a prince and a very powerful character. When he came to Primus, he was just really a commoner, albeit a commoner who had a link to Cebrian. So he was not as Adam. He was not in as much as a power position. As for Skeletor, the change that I wanted to make to him, I couldn't see making him more evil. How do you take a character like Skeletor, who is pretty much already the embodiment of evil, and make him more evil? So because I couldn't go that direction, I felt it might be fun to inject a little bit of wisecracking humor into him. And I know not everybody liked it, certainly not at the time that it was released. But I felt that it was something that was going to give him a little depth, make him more than just a cardboard character, make him a little bit three-dimensional, and give us a little bit of insight into his personality. Skeletor also was in a different position than he was in on Eternia. He was no longer ostensibly the top dog. Now, all of a sudden, he's got the mutants to deal with. He's got Flog to deal with. So I wanted to use his humor as a way of insight into this out-of-the-ordinary situation that he found himself involved in. So that was the reason that I changed him a little bit. I wanted to humanize him a little bit, and to make him a character that people would get a little smile out of. Difficult to do with a character that's a villain. And to go back to your question, Rainbow Bright, and I got to call you that because I just love that handle. But to go back to your question, I drew a little bit of inspiration from him, from one of my favorite characters who were villains, and that was J.R. Ewing from Dallas. A lot of you probably are not old enough to remember that series, except in reruns. But I always liked J.R. because he was a really bad guy, but he had this rapscallion attitude to him. So that's where I drew it from, and that was my reason for wanting to move in that direction, Martin.
And I think he comes across quite well to an adult audience. Like, now that I watch because I never saw the New Adventures of He-Man back when it first aired, but now that I've gotten the DVD set and I'm starting to watch it, I just find Skeletor hilarious. So I'm glad you did that in a way. I think it spans generations very well.
Well, that's good to hear you say that. And my experience after nearly 3 decades in working with children, my gosh. But my experience is that once you start talking down to kids, you've lost them. Once you start preaching to them, you've lost them. Children today, and more so now than back when I did NA, but children nowadays are so sharp. It's just absolutely unbelievable. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. I might add that I'm 57 years old and they're my first children. Book of Ecclesiastes says a time for everything in life, and this happens to be my time for having children. I look back in my 20s and 30s, and I don't think I would have wanted me as a parent. But I'm ready for it now, and I learned so much from them. And the other day I'm making breakfast for our family, and I hear like a type in my office, and I walk in, and my 4-year-old Zoe is sitting behind my desk in my chair, and she's typing on the computer. And I said, "What are you doing, honey?" And she says, "I'm on Barbie.com." And she's 4 years old, And I come around and I look, and she's got a shortcut on the desktop to Barbie.com. And I hear the printer start going. And I said, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm printing a coloring page." And I pick up a coloring page of Barbie as a princess. And I said, "Honey, how did you do that?" And she's 4, and she looks at me like I'm the doofus. And she says, "Dad, you just double click." Kids are so sharp. When I was 4 years old, I couldn't find my way around a sandbox. I was happy with a yo-yo and a slinky. So you're right that it is appealing to both generations. But, we see so many different great animated films today, like Shark's Tale and of course the Shrek franchise, that appeal to both generations, and the kids get it. The kids get a lot of it. So it is interesting, and you can't talk down to kids nowadays, that's for sure, because they're just too sharp.
Good point. Now, I had another question. If you can think back over all the episodes that you wrote of New Adventures, can you think of one that stands out as your favorite?
Well, I loved Running of the Herd. I felt that was a really deep story, and it was an emotional story, and it was certainly something that I enjoyed very, very much. There was another episode, and gosh, I confess that I have, and shame on me, but I have not watched the entire DVD collection yet. I'm in the middle of editing a pilot that I just shot for PBS, so it's been a very busy time for me. But there was an episode, and I'm sure somebody out there will remember which one it was, in which Skeletor and He-Man temporarily put aside their differences to fight a common enemy. And could be Sword in the Stone. I'm not sure which one it was. But, that I thought was a good moment. And what I liked about it was, particularly at the end of the episode, you feel this moment where there's a connect between Skeletor and He-Man. And there's almost this flicker of humanity in him, in Skeletor, that is a wonderful thing to see. And He-Man, realizing that even in the darkest of souls, there is this potential for redemption. And, we see this over and over. We certainly see that in the Star Wars franchise with Darth, in the wonderful, wonderful scene where Luke is battling against the Emperor. It's not so much when Darth comes around at the end. The thing that touches my heart is when you see Luke battling with the Emperor, and there's these cutaways to Darth, and he's watching it, and even though he's inside of his helmet, you sense this conflict in him where he's looking at what's going on, and you sense the humanity that's inside of him. So for me, that was a wonderful, wonderful moment between him and Skeletor. And in another great franchise that I'm a sucker for, the Rocky Balboa franchise, great moment at the end of Rocky 1 when, Rocky, has a split decision with Apollo Creed, and they're hugging each other after these 12 brutal rounds. And, Rocky says, I don't want a rematch. And Apollo says, there ain't going to be one, But it's sportsmanship. It's the heart of humanity that lies, I would hope, within even the darkest of souls. So, that was an important moment for me. It's an interesting question that you ask about what are the episodes that I like the most. And I have to answer it in a different sort of a way. For a writer, it is not so much the episodes, it is the moments. There's a great line in David Mamet's film called Glengarry Glen Ross, which has very, very rough language in it, but it's a brilliant film, probably the tightest film I've ever seen in my life. And Al Pacino at one moment asks, in a restaurant, he asks of one of his clients, he says, what are the things that we remember about great romances? He says, it's the moment. He says, it's not what you're doing with the person or the passion that you had. It's when she's laying in the crook of your arm and you look at her and she gives you a certain sort of a smile. So it's the moments in the episodes that I remember and the things that stand out to me, even over the span of time.
I like that answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Actually, Jack, I have to mention, I don't think the episode you just mentioned with the Skeletor and He-Man, kind of putting aside the differences, was actually made, because I was looking through the series Bible, and there's like some concepts for unmade episodes, and one of them sounds very similar to that, the one you've just described. But I don't think that was actually animated.
Gee, I'll have to go through that, Martin, and take a look, because I'm and again, it was a long time ago, but I almost remember that they were battling against some alien force, and it was on an asteroid or something, and the forces were trying to turn them against each other, and they were kind of feeding off their energy or something. But I'll have to go through that and look at it. If it's not in there, then I'll definitely stand corrected, and that'll be a flaw on my part. They often say that the ancient master rug weavers of Persia used to intentionally leave a flaw in their rug to prove that they weren't the equal of Allah. So that's my excuse when I screw up on a bi-weekly basis. That's my excuse.
Are there any, looking back now, is there anything that you wish you would have done? Kind of episodes you wish you'd done now?
Well, there's things I wish I wouldn't have done more than I would have done. I really, and I know that I've seen different answers on this one, but in retrospect, I really wish I didn't do the scientists. Part of the problem is they're really irritating voices. Okay, I'm sorry to say that, but that's the truth. That's my take on it. And having said that, I got to say that Sue Blue, who did the voice direction and is a tremendously talented voice artist in her own right, is absolutely brilliant, and we were so fortunate to have Sue involved with that project. She's an absolutely brilliant voice director. But I'm watching it the other day, and I'm like cringing. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I've got these guys that just brings the episode to a screeching halt. Having said that, my 7-year-old son Alex is watching the show, and after the episode is over, he's running around the living room, and he says, "Daddy, see mutants." And I say, "Mutants?" And he goes, "The mutants are coming, the mutants are coming." So, he loves the scientists, but for me, I would have changed that. Things that I would have done, the one really major thing that I would have done, and it doesn't have so much to do with an episode, I would have rolled the series out differently. And no question, but that hindsight is always 20/20. Mm-hmm. And Mattel is a tremendously successful organization. Unfortunately, it's also tremendously bureaucratic, and it moves slowly. But I would have rolled it out differently. I would have let all of the loyal He-Man fans from the classic series know that we planned on returning to Eternia, so that they weren't just hung out to dry there and irritated about it. I would have done that entirely differently. I would have actually reached out to the fans and got some input, but that's me, and I'm a writer, so it's a little different. But I would have rolled out the series entirely differently. The other thing that I would have done, if I could go back, is the one major change that I would have made is I would have brought Battle Cat into Primus with me. Mm-hmm. I felt that was something that really, really would have worked tremendously, would have opened up a lot of different dramatic plot lines that could have been enhanced by having Battle Cat there. I think I would have tried, despite some of my posts, I think I would have tried to have brought occasionally a character from Eternia into the episode. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was Misty Taggart that wrote the episode in which Tila was brought to.
Yes.
And Misty, again, tremendously talented writer, and I thought she did a spectacular job. And again, I have not seen that episode in many, many years, but I think there was even a portion in there where He-Man was, almost a little bit homesick. And, I thought that was a great idea to bring in characters from Eternia. Unfortunately, it's difficult to do it. When He-Man travels through time and space, it's going through a wormhole, and it's tough to maintain that what we call this great event is going to happen on a regular basis. But I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of an influence from Eternia to have that linkage between the two worlds.
Now, earlier you mentioned criticism from the classic He-Man fans. When did you actually become aware that some of the, and I say some because I'm a classic He-Man fan and I liked the New Adventures when it came on, but some of them have this type of, preconceived notion maybe about the show, or they only saw a few toys, they only saw an episode here or there, and they just, were turned off completely. When did you really become aware of that? And what would you say to them to maybe get them to really open their eyes to the series?
Yeah, I became aware of it about 12 hours after the first episode. It was a different time and place than He-Man is right now. When I first came on the website, and I had looked around and kind of stalked in the background, and not let anybody know that I was who I was when I was looking at the website. But when I first came on, John, I think I wrote to you that, I was a little bit concerned that I was going to be like Kevin Costner in that great scene in Dances with Wolves when he's on the horse and he's riding in front of the Confederate soldiers back and forth and people are shooting at him and he manages to survive somehow. I was certainly concerned that I was going to be figuratively drawn and quartered when I came on to the website. Of course, I was delighted to find out that I wasn't. But I have to tell you, when NA came out, the response was frenzied, and it was vitriolic, and a good deal of it was directed at me, a good deal of it was directed at Mattel, and it saddened me because I had a tremendous respect for not only the classic franchise, but also for many of the writers. I was so fortunate to have worked with Joe Straczynski while he was at Deke, and Joe, as far as I'm concerned, is an absolutely towering figure. I mean towering. I mean, the man is a true genius, and I've rarely seen anybody that has the passion that Joe has for writing and the respect that he has for the creative arts. So I had a tremendous respect for him, and of course for Paul, who I did not know, but Jean Chalopin knew him very well, and Larry DiTilio, of course, and Robbie London, who I worked with at Deke when Robbie came on as Vice President of Creative Affairs. So these were people that I knew very, very well, or at least knew them in association, and so it was disheartening for me to see this really vitriolic response from the fans. And I wrote back to a number of them, and I said, gosh, give it a chance, and this is what I'm hoping to do when we go to season 2. But the problem was you didn't have thousands and thousands of people that were writing in, and there was no way in those days to reach them. Mm-hmm. So, I fully understood, empathized and sympathized with where they were at. I believe that it was Larry, and if it wasn't, I'll apologize to him, but I believe it was Larry that I sent the early series Bible to, because I wanted to have him write for the series, and he read the Bible. And we had a discussion, and he was certainly respectful, and he said, look, Jack, it's just not for me. And I thought, wow, is that an awesome tribute to, number one, the classic series, and number two, his level of integrity as a writer, that he would pass on getting involved with the series because he felt that it wasn't faithful enough to the original, and to give up what could have been a pretty substantial chunk of change coming at him. So I felt that was really a microcosm of the larger fan base, and I think at some point Mattel began to realize it, but it was too late, and the series was rolled out, and there was just nothing that they could do about it at that point.
So what kind of what would you say to the fans to make them want to watch the show? I mean, a lot of them are just because of the DVDs, but what if they're saying, I don't know if I really should buy the DVDs. I saw the first episode back in the day. He-Man had pants. I don't know. What would you say to kind of draw them in?
I would say, number one, when you saw it, it was 17 years ago, or whatever it was. You were very different 17 years ago than you are now. Number two, 17 years ago, it was too close to the classic He-Man for you to be objective about it. I understand your anger. I feel your pain. So now, with the passage of time, give it another shot. Let it stand on its own. I tried to quantify it in a number of different ways, to say that it was an extension, to say that it was a part of the He-Man mythos. But there was one post that I saw recently, and I excuse me for not recalling who it was, but it's there on heman.org. And one of the people who posted said that they came around to it and they enjoyed it for what it was, and they said that it is not a part of the classic series, but they have resigned themselves to giving it a chance and to accepting it on the basis that New Adventures is another adventure for He-Man. And I think that's exactly what it is. It should not be compared to his adventures on Eternia, because it's not supposed to be that. It's supposed to be him moving away. You know, to use a little bit of an absurd example, it's, George Jefferson and the Jeffersons moving away from Archie Bunker's neighborhood and moving on up to the east side. And, the spin-off series, The Jeffersons, did very well. Well, it wasn't Archie Bunker, all in the family, but it was something that was different. It was another adventure for George Jefferson. Of course, I like to allude to classic television, Norman Lear, who was, a genius. And I certainly don't begin to equate myself to that. But it was a different adventure for him. And the fact is, if you loved He-Man, He-Man is there. Skeletor is there. They still have the relationship that they had on Eternia. The battle continues. And if you love He-Man, if you love Skeletor, if you love that battle, that classic matchup between good and evil, then take a look at it as seen through a different filter. And, you're still going to see He-Man there. He still has his core values. He still cares about people. And it's a different He-Man. I would hope that the characters, and it sounds a bit immodest, but I would hope that the characters are developed and a little bit more full and a little bit more dimensional in the sense that they have different kind of relationships now. In Eternia, Skeletor was calling the whole shot, okay? He was Idi Amin. On Primus, this is a different kind of Skeletor. The guy has to live by his wits and he has to, sometimes play I, Claudius. And He-Man, all of a sudden, he's got two gals here that, are kind of attracted to him on a couple of different levels. So, we've got different characters. I think we've got some characters that are really engaging. Listen, I was crazy about Criddle, okay? That was one of my favorite characters in the series. But, then I've always been drawn to powerful, independent women like She-Ra. So, she was a fun character. So I think it's sampling of new characters, new kinds of stories in a different time and place, but you still got He-Man and Skeletor in there, so have some fun with it, and don't get shackled to the past with it. Give it a shot,
I really like how you mentioned that perhaps it happened too close to the classic series, because actually the He-Man and She-Ra, or at least He-Man, was still in reruns on like the US, on cable when the New Adventures came out in syndication. Do you think that maybe if it had premiered maybe just a couple years later than it did, that it would have had a completely different reaction?
Absolutely. I agree with you entirely. It was a tactical error, again, on Mattel's part, and, driven by a desire to create a fresh revenue stream. And, you look back and you say, well, if it had been successful, it would have been entirely different. When I developed the Power Rangers for Haim Saban, I remember Haim and his wonderful wife Cheryl, who were very dear friends of mine and still are. They came down to my place in Palm Springs, and Haim was floating in the pool, and he was saying, "Gosh, everything's going so bad. The animation market is oversaturated, and I'm getting ready to go belly up." He says, "If it goes all bad," he says, "I can move back to Israel. I've got a couple of falafel stands back there." And that's a true story. And he pulls me into his office about a month later. And he says, "I got this series that I paid $350,000 for. It ran in the 70s in Japan." He says, "I want you to not be concerned about what the old series is. Create something entirely new." He says, "Most of the characters are wearing helmets and they're in costumes, and you'll create a whole new show. All I have to do is go out and hire voiceover artists. My production is covered. Hire voiceover artists and dub in new lines." And I thought, what a brilliant idea. Of course, Woody had done it with What's Up Tiger Lily many years ago, but it was a great idea. So I said, "Let me see it." Shoves in the video cassette, and I started watching it, and it's Power Rangers, and my mouth hangs open, and I said, "My God, you've got dinosaurs, you've got martial arts, you've got aliens." I said, "It's worth $1 billion. And I thought I was overstating it to inflate his ego a little, and of course I was under by a factor of 5 or 6. Unfortunately, wow. I did not own a piece of that project, but it went on to, of course, become one of the great successes in children's entertainment at all times. And I saw Haim at MIP a few years later, and we gave each other hugs. And I said, Haim, I said, just unbelievable, the success that you're having. He says, yeah, he says, everybody calls me a visionary now that the show is so successful. He said, of course, if it had bombed, everybody would say, oh, that idiot, he spent $300,000 for a piece of junk. So, you know, again, hindsight is 50-50. Now, if Mattel had been successful in their endeavor with NA, and it had pulled the fans in, and it had become this spectacular franchise, everybody would have said, wow, they were geniuses. You know, they released this show at the time that it was still running in syndication, and they made the bridge and everything, and they kept it going. Well, it didn't become successful, so it was the inverse of Haim's situation, and everybody, of course, now says that it was apocalyptic, and, you know, you see the mistakes going back in time. So, yes, but in answer, a long answer to a short question, yeah, I think they should have waited a while, but you know, we have the advantage of looking at it from you know, from a hill in the landscape of children's entertainment. It's easy to look back and say, yeah, they should have done this, they should have done that, you know.
Just as a real quick aside, I think Power Rangers came out about when I was 13. I think that's really awesome that someone that worked on He-Man so extensively also worked on Power Rangers. I was a really big Power Ranger fan back when it came out.
And still am.
Yeah. I still catch a new episode here and there.
I'm glad to hear that. That's kind of tough for me to hear that you were 13 at the time. I was, you know, it makes me feel a little dated. I was in Office Max a couple of weeks ago, so I was talking to a young man that was doing a print job for me. And it was for a show that I'm developing. So he said, oh, do you write for television? I said, yeah. So I said, oh, I created the New Adventures of He-Man. I said, it's just come out on DVD. I said, are you a He-Man fan? So he looks at me and says, no. He says, I'm not. He says, but my dad used to be.
Oh.
So I said, thanks. That makes me feel real good. But I was very fortunate to be involved with Power Rangers. I saw Haim in Cannes, France a number of years ago, and I brought my son over there when my son was a baby. And Haim is an amazing father, and his wife Cheryl is an unbelievable mother. They've done so much for children. They endowed a $40 million research unit at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, and Cheryl goes to the hospital and visits children there, which, you know, somebody at that rarefied strata certainly doesn't have to do, but they're amazing, amazing parents. And so I brought my son over to Cannes and my wife, and Haim takes my baby at the time, and he's rocking the baby. He says, oh, your son is so beautiful, Jack. And he gives it back to Kim, and he gives a hug, and of course people are watching, and I grabbed from my back pocket, and he says, what are you doing? I said, I'm checking my wallet to see if you're putting money in there for everything I did for you on Power Rangers. So he said, you did okay on that project, and I said, you're right, it opened a lot of doors. So he really was a visionary, and you know, Haim is an amazing human being. He was a trade ambassador for Bill Clinton during that administration, going over to Israel, and he does a lot of wonderful philanthropy. He was sat on the board of regents for the California college system, and he's just an incredible person. I was fortunate to have Haim Saban and Andy Hayward, who is now the owner of DEEC, president of DEEC, as my mentors for the business of children's entertainment, and to have Jean Chalopin, co-creator of Inspector Gadget and dozens of shows, as my mentor for the creative side. So you're lucky if you get 2 or 3 people in your life that do that for you, and I certainly was fortunate to have them.
That is great. Real quick, you mentioned how you did perhaps contact Larry DiTillio. What was the type of process you went through in picking the writers for the show? Because I know there are a few that did write for the classic He-Man and She-Ra, like Francis Moss and Michael Reeves, that did get to write for the New Adventures.
Right. You know, I got to be honest about it, and I always am. In the beginning, it was pretty much the Jack Olesker show. And I have tried as much as possible when I'm working in television to do as many shows for a series as I can. Now, obviously, some of that is self-serving because you want to have as many assignments as you can. the thing that and Mark Taylor really wanted me to do most of the episodes, and I think that he understood that by having one writer involved in the show, what you really end up with is a tremendous amount of continuity. And a number of fans have commented about that NA had a lot of continuity.
Yes, something Filmation lacked.
Right. And, I've sat on the other side of the desk for many, many years when I was senior story editor at Deke and working on shows like Heathcliff the Cat and Mask and Lady Lovelylocks and the Popples and other shows where I've hired 6 or 7 writers, brilliant writers like Jack Hanrahan and Ellen Berrien Moore and many, many, many writers in the industry. And the problem when you're a story editor is you have 5 or 6 writers that are bringing in episodes to you, and then you have to sit down with those, and you have to bring them into what's called house style so that, the characters sound right from episode to episode. I remember when I was story editor on Heathcliff the Cat, I got a letter once from a 7-year-old viewer that said, in this episode, Heathcliff says this. Heathcliff would never say that line. So, the kids out there are very, very sharp. So I think that Mark and certainly Karen and Deborah over at Mattel wanted to have that continuity. We needed the show to be done very, very fast. Mm-hmm. And because of rolling out the toy line. And they knew that one of the things about me is I'm a very, very fast writer. So that was a benefit along with the relationship that we had. So in the beginning, I was knocking out 3 episodes, sometimes 4 episodes a week. And that was going from the springboard to a beat outline to maybe 2 or 3 revisions on a 32-page script. So, I was really working 20 hours a day. As we got further into it, and the show began to really take on its own life, and I certainly knew I wasn't going to be able to write 65 episodes, we decided that we wanted to pull in some other writers to take that load off of me a little bit and allow me to get some sleep. So Mark pulled in Jack Mendelson, and I was delighted and privileged to have Jack involved in it. Jack was a very, very dear friend of mine, an old associate of mine. I had worked with him for years over at Deke, and Jack he has a history that goes way back. Just Google him. He goes way back in the industry to the 50s, and working for Filmation and Hanna-Barbera. And Jack was the co-writer of Yellow Submarine and worked as a story editor for the Old Three's Company series. So a tremendously talented and gifted writer. And Francis Moss was a close associate of his, so he certainly used him for writing a number of episodes. And Jack really was the one who pulled in those other writers. I wasn't really involved with it too much. I story edited some of the episodes, but Jack really pulled in a number of those writers, like Kevin O'Donnell and Misty, and I thought they did a wonderful, wonderful job. When I look back at the work that they did, I thought that they did a great job. Having said that, I think, and again, it may sound a bit immodest, but I think that I laid a good foundation because I wrote so many of those early episodes, and then, of course, the closing 5. But I think that the characters, the situations, and the dramatic thrust of the series was so well established that they were able to come in and watch 3 or 4 episodes and get a real quick handle on the show. Mm. So it was really Jack Mendelson that was responsible as a story editor for bringing in those outside writers. I was just too busy with writing the episodes at that point to get involved with story editing too many of them.
I think
certainly didn't give you much time to do research. That's amazing. I think that, with such a short schedule that you had to get all this in, that you really didn't have time to go back and watch all the, classic episodes to get your facts right. That the fact that you had all that already in your head because it sounds like you were a fan of the classic show before you even started with NA. Is that correct?
It is correct, but you know what? I cannot say that I was a rabid fan, okay? And again, I'll hark back to Dallas, the old series, which, gosh, a lot of you listening probably don't even remember Dallas. But I was a rabid fan of Dallas, and I could sit down right now. I could write 10 pages about Sue Ellen Ewing and Jock and all the wonderful characters on there. So I was a rabid fan of it. I was not of He-Man. I certainly knew the series. I certainly had seen episodes. But again, to answer one of your other questions, was there something I wish I could have done? Man, I wish I could have had the luxury of going back and spending a month to watch every single episode that was ever done, and really do that from the standpoint of research and osmosis and sucking everything in. I didn't have that luxury, but a number of fans have said that the essence of He-Man and Skeletor was there, and an equal number of fans have said, gosh, this isn't the Skeletor that I knew. Now, of the ones that have said this isn't the Skeletor that I knew, probably an equal number have said, I really like the new Skeletor, and an equal number have said, what have you done to my Skelly? So that happens. And, while I'm on this subject, let me add one thing for everybody listening. I had very, very little to do with the art, okay? I reviewed the storyboards, but I had very, very little to do with the art. And I agree with everybody, okay? I did not like Skeletor having eyes, okay? I felt it was a huge mistake to have Skeletor having eyes. But I know very, very little about art. I didn't get involved with it too much. The head of the studio in Tokyo, I think it was KKC&D, it was Jean's studio over in Tokyo, flew over, Terata was his name, and he flew over, and we had a meeting in Jetlag's studios in Los Angeles, and he brought a translator because he didn't speak English, and we were going over storyboards at one point, and I didn't like one scene, and I started sketching out what I wanted the storyboard to be for that scene. And he said something to his translator, and she was a very demure young 22 or 23-year-old Japanese lady, and she put her hand over her mouth, and she started to giggle. And I said, what did Terata say? So she said, oh, no, nothing, Mr. Olesker. So I said, well, you have to tell me. She said, oh, no, nothing at all. I said, you can't laugh and not tell me what he said. So she started running it through her mind how to translate it, and she said, Terata-san say, don't quit your day job. So when it comes to drawing or sketching, I know nothing about that. I'm always so stunned to see the fan art on heman.org. When I see what these fans have done, it's just awe-inspiring to me. But one of the great mistakes, the everlasting mistakes that I felt that NA made was giving Skeletor eyes.
So see, don't blame Jack for the eyes, not his issue.
Not his fault.
I think Martin has our last question about some of the elements in the show.
Okay.
Go ahead, Martin.
I know there was a lot more humour in the New Adventures than there ever was in the classic show. And often when the classic show did do humour, it was very kind of... it was something that was much targeted towards a younger audience, whereas the New Adventures had kind of more jokes that adults and kids could both get, like lots of Skeletor's lines. And was that kind of your influence, kind of adding more humour and...
I really wanted to do that. I've been so fortunate to be involved with children all of my life, and it's the joy of this writer's life to be able to have a small part in helping to form children's thoughts and minds. I think when you write for children's entertainment, unlike a lot of other entertainment, it's incumbent upon you to realize that you're working for young, impressionable beings, and there's a great responsibility that comes along with that. I created the It's Okay to Say No to Drugs program, so I take that responsibility very, very seriously. I can hear a lot of people out there, saying, oh, this is the guy that did Power Rangers, and there's a lot of violence in there. And yeah, it's true. There certainly is a lot of violence in there, but nonetheless, it's good against evil. I felt that with He-Man, that I wanted to, and it was on the first page of my Bible, I said, this is a kinder, gentler He-Man. I wanted him to rely a little bit more on his mind for thinking things out, on magic rather than on sheer strength. And I won't get into my feelings about being able to lift Castle Grayskull. But, I mean, if a hero is omnipotent, where is the dramatic tension here? So I wanted it to be a little bit kinder, gentler, a little bit funnier. One of the wonderful things about our society, whether it's politics or whether it's entertainment or whatever it is that when that pendulum swings out too far to the left or the right, we have a wonderful way in our world of moving things back towards center. And I think in children's entertainment, I started to see things were starting to swing out too far with it being violent. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people like South Park. I've never been one to hold back on things. So, I know a lot of fans are probably going to be irritated about me saying this, but I think the pendulum swung too far out on South Park. And, we're talking about kids. And I think that it needed to start swinging back a little bit more towards center. Mm-hmm. So my sprinkling in a little bit of seasoning, a little bit of brown sugar, and a little bit of cinnamon by throwing in humor was my attempt in a very small way to pull that pendulum back towards a little bit of a kinder, gentler entertainment. So that was why I put the humor in there.
Fantastic answers to all of our questions. The New Adventures of He-Man, the first half of the entire series, is already out on DVD, so definitely pick that up. It was just announced that the New Adventures of He-Man, the second half of the entire series, will be on DVD on March 27th, so you must pick that one up as well. It is unacceptable not to buy them, because then you can't have the whole spine mural, because, it's in between He-Man and She-Ra. It wasn't even planned that way, but what wonderful marketing, I think. And, buy them. It has documentaries, art cards, episode guide, all the fun stuff. We really, really, really want to thank Jack Olesker for taking time out of his Saturday here to talk with us and, answer all the questions.
Yes, thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much,
and
Jack.
thank you all so much for having me here. And, I want to end by saying that from the bottom of my heart, I am so appreciative to heman.org for having the forum there. I am so appreciative to the producers of the DVDs, to all of the wonderful and talented artists, amazing artwork that was involved with it. And I am so appreciative, really, again, from the bottom of my heart, to all of the fans out there, whether the ones that are strong fans of NA or whether the ones that have constructive criticism. I have such a great appreciation and love for all of you for keeping a franchise alive that's been out of production for so long. Again, my most sincere thanks to all of you and for letting me be involved in it.
Well, thank you again for, you're so good with participating with the fans. Thanks again for doing the podcast, of course. And what do we say? We got to say Jack Olesker was here. Yeah!
Yay!
My pleasure, and I hope to see everybody on the forums real soon.
Again, thank you so much to Jack Olesker for participating in an interview for Masters Cast. And remember, any feedback you want to give us, hop on the website, masterscast.com, send us an email, voicemail, whatever. We listen to them all, even if they don't appear on the show, because actually, sometimes I can't fit the voicemails on the show. I'm very sorry. But we try to keep the show condensed so it fits on a CD, because we know many of you love to hear me talk in your car. Right? Am I right? Okay. Thanks again for downloading. I'm John Callis, also known as The Shadow.
I'm Katie Carty, also known as Rainbow Bright.
And I'm Martin Penny, also known as Wacky Moded.
Safe journey!